August 30th, 1945. Los Alamos Laboratory, New Mexico. The desert night is cold, but inside the metallurgy building the air is thick and hot, heavy with cigarette smoke and the metallic tang of machine oil. A softball-sized sphere of plutonium, dull gray under the harsh work lights, rests on a velvet-lined cradle while technicians in denim overalls and rumpled khaki lean in, measuring, checking, signing off. On the clipboard it has a bland designation HS5R2. To the men in the room, it is something else entirely. It is the heart of what will quietly become the fifth atomic bomb the United States assembles. You can almost hear the building hum. Lathes chatter in a neighboring shop. A Geiger counter ticks faintly from a test bench, and every so often a truck growls past outside on the rutted Mesa Road. The war, they've been told, is over. Japan has agreed to surrender. The newspapers in Santa Fe carry photographs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The strange-eyed, towering clouds and the flattened cities under them. Yet here, up on the hill, the tempo hasn't slowed as much as you'd think. Captain Robert Broad, Army Ordnance, runs a thumb down the production log, lips moving silently as he adds the numbers. Trinity, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. A third Fat Man Corps cast in early August and held back at the last minute when Japan's surrender offer came in. Now this one, HS5 nearly finished, and behind it, another corps in process, HS6. On paper, the schedule is brutally clear: 3 bombs a month in August, rising to 5 per month in November, 7 per month in December. The factory of the apocalypse is only just getting up to speed. Broad looks up as the lab door opens. A bespectacled civilian physicist in a creased white shirt steps in, badge swinging from his breast pocket, hair sticking out at odd angles. He's been running calculations on critical mass all afternoon. "How close are we?" Brodet asks. "Dimples are within tolerance," the physicist replies, nodding toward the plutonium core. "We'll have it to quality control tonight, if this war hadn't ended." He trails off, eyes flicking to the sphere. That thing would be on a B-29 somewhere over the Pacific, in a matter of days. They both know the routine by now. Plutonium from Hanford arrives by guarded train, is machined into hemispheres, alloyed and polished here at Los Alamos, then paired with high-explosive lenses and initiators to form a weapon almost identical to the one that erased Nagasaki. Each core that passes this bench is an unspoken promise another Japanese city, already burning in someone's imagination. Down the hill, in a cramped office papered with contour maps and reconnaissance photos, that imagination is being formalized. A major from the Army Air Forces pins fresh aerial images to a corkboard dockyards, rail yards, dark grids of wooden houses, Kokura, Niigata, Yokohama, cities that escaped the first 2 bombs but sit high on the continuing target lists for what planners blandly call subsequent special missions. If the war had lasted into late August and September, those names, not Hiroshima and Nagasaki, might have become the world's new synonyms for annihilation. For now, the 5th Bombs Corps gleams softly in the light, waiting to be sealed away in a steel sphere, to be married to high explosives and hoisted into the bomb bay of a silver B-29. The technicians move around it with the wary familiarity of men who have seen what its predecessors can do. The war is over. The production line is still running. And somewhere, on a classified sheet in Washington, the next Japanese city has already been penciled in. On Tinian, thousands of miles from the humming shops of Los Alamos, the air tastes of hot coral dust and aviation fuel. It is mid-August 1945 and the runways of Northfield shimmer in the heat. You can hear the whine of B-29 starters, the clang of tools on steel, the shouted orders of ground crews moving under the wings of aircraft with names painted in careful letters along their noses. Enola Gay, Boxcar, Straight Flush, Full House, inside an assembly building near the southern edge of the field. It smells of solvent, sweat and explosives. Wooden crates stenciled with cryptic codes are stacked waist-high. Men from the 5/9 Composite Group, stripped down to their T-shirts, move deliberately around a steel framework that will cradle the next Fat Man-type weapon. They do not yet have a serial number for its core, only a schedule. Trinity in July. Nagasaki on the 9th of August. The next implosion bomb, they have been told, should be ready to drop around the 19th. Colonel Paul Tibbets steps through the door, his flight cap tucked under one arm. The mission roster for the 5/9 is a living thing in his head, shifting as the aircraft go down for maintenance or crews are rotated off operations. The special weapons schedule is pinned in his office, red penciled dates marching into September. If the war does not end. He knows. The third Fat Man will not be the last. He pauses beside the bare bomb frame and rests a hand on the cold metal. It is only a shell right now, a hollow body waiting for the heart that is still on the hill at Los Alamos, being polished and gauged. When that plutonium core arrives on Tinian, it will come inside a nondescript shipping container, guarded and quiet, escorted from ship to shore by armed MPs who have never been told what exactly they are guarding. In the bomb pits beside runway A, Seabees and airmen check the hydraulic lifts, wipe down grease fittings, test the controls that will raise the huge weapons into the bellies of waiting B-29s. The pits are deep rectangles of shadow set into the bright coral, like open graves for machines. The crews joke to cut the tension, trading wisecracks as they work. But every so often, one of them glances up at the sky and imagines what another mushroom cloud would look like over a Japanese city. Across the island, in a cramped briefing room, operations officers argue over target lists. Kokura, Niigata, maybe Nagasaki again if necessary. Rail hubs, arsenals, port facilities, and miles of wooden civilian homes that will burn like kindling. Rumors circulate among the crews that the next missions will be easier now that Japan is beaten down. That resistance is crumbling. No one says out loud that for the people who live under those target circles, there will be nothing easy about it at all. Back at Los Alamos, the 5th Corps glows dully in its cradle. On Tinian, bomb frames wait in their racks. The Pacific War is in its final days, but the machinery that could erase more cities is already primed. All it needs is a decision. August 13th, 1945. Washington, D.C. Late afternoon. Rain streaks the tall windows of the Pentagon, turning the view of the parking lots and access roads into a blur of gray and headlights. Inside a secure conference room, the air is close and smells of coffee, pipe smoke, and damp wool. Maps line the walls. Japan fills the center of the main one, a pale outline crowded with colored pins and grease pencil circles. General George Marshall stands with his hands clasped behind his back, studying the map in silence. The red rings mark cities already burned by conventional raids. Black crosses mark Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yellow pins mark something else entirely. Kokura, Niigata, a couple of smaller industrial centers most Americans have never heard of. Each yellow pin represents a candidate for the 3rd, 4th, maybe 5th atomic missions. Across the table, Major General Leslie Groves flips through a folder, the papers inside covered with stamped classifications and columns of figures, production schedules, corps casting dates, shipping tables from Hanford to Los Alamos, from there to Tinian. He taps a page with one thick finger. "We will have another implosion weapon ready for field use in about a week," he says. "A gun type in reserve, and follow-on implosion cores at roughly 10 days intervals after that. Our rate will improve as the plants stabilize. You can picture the line of bombs he is describing, not as numbers on a sheet, but as very real weights that will need very real aircraft and very real cities to fall on. Each date on his chart is a possible morning when another sun might rise over Japan." The Navy admiral seated near the far end of the table exhales slowly. He has spent his war in the Pacific. watching men die by the thousands for nameless ridges and atolls. To him, the bombs are terrifying but also brutally simple arithmetic if more atomic attacks force a surrender. Maybe that saves an invasion that will drown beaches in blood. A messenger steps in, rainwater still beaded on his cap, and hands a cable to the duty officer. The paper moves down the table, hands passing it from man to man. Soviet forces are crashing into Manchuria. Japanese diplomats are fumbling through neutral countries, trying to negotiate terms. There are intercepted messages about the emperor, about conditions, about a possible end that might come without another city vanishing in white light. In the White House map room, President Harry Truman leans over his own set of documents. Photographs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki lie beside casualty estimates for an invasion of Kyushu. He rubs his temples, a man caught between different nightmares. One of his advisors reminds him that more bombs will be available soon, that holding them in reserve might encourage Japan to stall, that only unmistakable continued shock will break the last of their will. Another voice argues that the world has already seen enough. For a moment, Truman imagines explaining it all later. How many atomic bombs were lined up behind Hiroshima and Nagasaki? How many more cities were penciled in? How close the war came to a third, fourth, fifth flash? Then he pushes the thought aside and asks a simpler question. Have they answered yet? Are they going to surrender on the terms we laid down? Out over the Pacific, B-29 crews drill and wait. At Los Alamos, machinists finish polishing the fifth core. In Washington, pens hover over orders that have not quite been written. The war hangs on words in cables and the interpretation of an emperor's silence. The bombs are real. Whether they will fly again is not yet decided. August 14th, 1945, Tinian. Late evening. The sun has dropped under the horizon, leaving the island drenched in a heavy purple twilight. North Field is still awake. Floodlights glare off the polished skins of the B-29s, casting long, sharp shadows across the coral. The air is thick with humidity and the constant, distant thrum of generators. In a briefing hut near the operations center, the airmen of the 509th sit on wooden benches, sweat darkening their collars. Cigarette smoke curls toward the bare bulbs overhead. On the wall, a canvas curtain hangs in front of a map of Japan. Everyone knows what lies behind it. An intelligence officer, sleeves rolled, steps up to the front and pulls the cord. The curtain snaps aside. There it is again, the familiar outline of the home islands. And over it, a circle drawn in red grease pencil, tight and unforgiving. Kokura, an industrial city, an arsenal, a place most of the men in the room could not have found on a globe before this summer. He taps the circle with a pointer. Primary target. Weather permitting, alternate follows if coverage is solid over the primary. His voice is steady, but everyone hears what he does not say. By the time they get there, if they get there. Kokura might already be famous in a way no one wants to be famous. The details spill out. Altitudes, approach routes, expected flak, radio call signs. The atomic bomb itself is described in the same dry cadence as any other piece of ordnance. A special weapon, an item of cargo that will be assembled in the pits and raised into the belly of the chosen aircraft shortly before dawn on the 19th. No one calls it the third atomic bomb. No one has to. Out by the bomb assembly building, under red-filtered lights, the ground crews go through checklists. Dummy shapes are winched into position, hoisted, lowered, hoisted again until the choreography is perfect, until they can do it half asleep. The pits lie open, dark mouths in the concrete waiting for something that has not yet arrived from Los Alamos, for that next plutonium heart to begin its journey west. Up at group headquarters, Colonel Tibbets walks into the radio room, cap under his arm, jaw tight. A signal from Washington waits on the desk, just decoded. the flimsy paper still warm from the machine. The Japanese cabinet has met. The emperor has spoken. There is confusion in Tokyo. Hardliners shouting for one more battle. But cables from MacArthur's staff in Manila say a message is coming. Acceptance of the Potsdam terms, if certain face-saving formulas are observed. Truman has given an instruction of his own. No more atomic bombs on Japan without his express order. Hold further missions. Stand by. On Tinian, that order arrives as a simple change on a duty board. The special mission scheduled for the 19th is first marked tentative, then erased with a squeak of chalk. In the briefing hut, the airmen are told to stand down, to stay near their aircraft, to await further notice. Some cheer, some simply sit in stunned silence, as if a noose they had not realized was around their own necks has loosened outside. The island seems to exhale. The bomb pits remain empty. The cranes go still, somewhere over the Pacific. A line that led from Hanford to Los Alamos to Tinian and finally to Kokura breaks in the air and hangs there, unfinished. In the dark, with the runway lights glowing against low cloud, it is hard to believe that a decision made in rooms half a world away has just spared a city no one here has ever seen. August 30th, 1945. Los Alamos Laboratory, New Mexico. The same sphere of plutonium sits in the same velvet-lined cradle. But the feeling in the room is different now. Outside, on the mesa, the aspens are beginning to show the faintest hint of autumn. The war in the Pacific is over. The newspapers that arrive from Santa Fe carry headlines about occupation plans and war crimes trials instead of casualty lists. Inside the metallurgy building, the machines still run. Lathes spin. Cutters whine. The smell of coolant and hot metal hangs thick. But there is a slackness in the shoulders of the men at the benches, an uncertainty that was not there in July. They know now that this corps will not be rushed into a crate, hustled to a waiting aircraft, raced across oceans toward a target circle on a map. Captain Robert Broad flips through his logbook again. Trinity, Hiroshima, Nagasaki. Then blank spaces where follow-on bombs were supposed to be entered. Spaces that felt inevitable only weeks ago. He glances at the page that holds the schedule Groves sent earlier in the month. The confident projection of 3 bombs in August, 5 later in the year. It looks strange now, like a prediction from some other world. The physicist in the creased white shirt stands at the bench, calipers in hand, measuring the subtle dimples machined into the core to help control its density. He writes the numbers down automatically, but his mind is elsewhere. So, what happens to it now? One of the technicians asks, nodding at the gray metal sphere. We will probably use it for tests. The physicist says, critical assemblies, experiments on how close you can push the geometry. We still have things to learn. The word hangs there. Was meant to erase a city will instead become a classroom object, a piece of apparatus to be prodded and probed. It is hard not to imagine an invisible ledger somewhere, with a column labeled lives that will not be lost because this heart of a bomb will never be mated to high explosives. Down the hill, in a different building, a small group of theorists crowd around a chalkboard lined with equations. They are already thinking ahead. Past Fat Man designs and crude gun types into more efficient weapons, lighter casings, different implosion geometries. They speak of yields in kilogram and efficiencies, but each improvement is a magnification of what men in other countries will see as blinding light and heat. That night, a storm rolls over the Jemez Mountains, lightning flickering on the horizon. In a guarded vault room, the finished core is lowered gently into a steel container lined with cushioning material, then placed on a heavy shelf beside other objects that carry the same quiet danger. A guard signs the log, snaps the padlock shut, and sits back down at his desk with a magazine. If you could see through the walls, you would see the 5th core resting there, a few kilos of metal that were once scheduled, on paper, to become a sun over another Japanese city. Now it waits for a different fate. Not relief exactly, because metal cannot feel relief. But in the silence of the vault, there is a sense of something that almost was and now will not be. On Tinian, the bomb pits are empty. In Washington, planners turn their eyes toward Europe again and the shadow of the Soviet Union. At Los Alamos, the production line that was meant to feed a chain of atomic missions is already being repurposed for a new kind of war that has not yet been given a name. The fifth bomb exists. It has no mission. That does not make it safe. September 1945. The vault at Los Alamos is cool and dim, the air dry and still. A guard unlocks the heavy door, swings it open, and two technicians step inside with a wheeled cart and a clipboard. The steel container that holds the fifth core waits on its shelf. Anonymous. Its danger hidden behind dull gray paint and a serial number that means little to anyone outside a very small circle. They lift it down carefully, muscles straining, and set it on the cart. On the form, under purpose. Someone has written a new phrase, criticality experiments. No one bothers to cross out what is not written their special mission. Tinian, target Kokura. In a nearby building, shielded with concrete and lead bricks, they prepare a different kind of stage, two halves of a neutron reflector, tungsten carbide bricks, instruments that click and chatter as the flux of invisible particles rises and falls. The idea is simple in outline and perilous in execution. Bring fissile material closer to the edge of chain reaction. Measure it. Learn exactly where the cliff begins. Knowledge that will feed into safer designs, better weapons, more controlled reactors. The core is uncrated, lifted from its cradle, its surface cool and faintly rough under gloved hands. A physicist who only weeks earlier was running bomb yield calculations now stands over it with a slide rule in his pocket and a furrow in his brow. Another technician adjusts the bricks around it, building a cage of dense material that reflects neutrons back into the plutonium, pushing it toward that invisible line where a quiet piece of metal becomes a roaring fire. You can almost hear the tension in the room, a different kind from the charged silence of a bomb-loading pit. Here, there are no B-29s, no target maps, no Japanese names on the wall, only numbers on dials and the steady, rising tick of counters. Men lean in, a little too close, a little too confident, as the core that nearly became the heart of a third atomic attack is brought again and again near to critical. Months pass. The war recedes into photographs and decorations pinned to uniforms in closets. The fifth core, never dropped, never armed, acquires a new, whispered name among the staff after accidents and near misses in these experiments. Demon, not because it is cursed, but because it has a way of reminding the living that their calculations are never as perfect as they believe. Later, when criticality accidents claim lives in that same program, people will look back at the logs and see the same mass of metal at the center of it all, used and reused, a survivor of a mission that never flew. Somewhere in Japan, in a city that might have been chosen as a target, children walk to school past wooden houses that would not have survived a white flash. In Kokura, factory workers file through gates for shifts in plants that were once circled on Allied maps. They do not know how close their names came to being etched into the vocabulary of horror. Back in the New Mexico mountains, the laboratories expand. New designs are drawn, new cores are cast. New strategies are debated in rooms that now speak of deterrence and balances of terror instead of victory over Japan. The fifth bomb remains a footnote, a shadow in the archives, a thing that almost happened to people who will never realize it. The story of that unused core sits at the hinge between worlds, one in which a line of atomic suns marched across Japan into late 1945 and the one we know, where the war stopped at 2. It is a reminder that history is not only made by what explodes, but also by what stays locked in a vault, by missions erased from chalkboards, by targets that never see the strange, deadly dawn that was once scheduled for them.